Okay, thank you, everyone. If I can have your attention. We're now going to move on to the second plenary session, and this focuses on the essential skills and pathways for up-and-coming lawyers. So how to develop a career and practice as a human rights lawyer. Now, we have 4 panelists or 4 speakers here with us. We also have Eleanor Thompson, who's joining us from Sierra Leone. And so I will introduce you to our 2 moderators. So our moderators are Zainab Hassan and Natalia Pezzi, and they are our young experts. So Girls Human Rights Hub recruited 30 young experts from around the world last year, and we work together. They help us with our work. We train, mentor, coach them. They guide us in our work and are instrumental in the work that we do. So please do welcome Zainab and Natalia to the stage.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zainab, and I'm a young expert, as Sultana said. I'm also an aspiring barrister. I'm studying for the bar course right now, so I'm an aspiring human rights barrister. I'll be one of your moderators today, and with me will be Natalia.
Hello. First of all, I feel very honored to be sharing this panel with these inspiring women. And I am one of the young experts here today, and I recently graduated as a gender specialist in the Masters of Development and International Relations. And right now, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Soraya Bauwens. She's an international human rights barrister and former deputy director of Reprieve. She's an expert in human rights in the Middle East and North Africa, and frequently appeared at the United Nations as an advocate and expert on state compliance with international law, and she also lectures at the University on Human Rights. So welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying this really, really exciting group of women who are here to share their experiences with you. And we're looking forward also to hearing your questions and to learning from you about what you think your future careers are going to look like. I started my career 15 years ago, but not in the career that I'm in now, which is a criminal and international human rights law barrister. I actually started in the NGO world, and I started at Reprieve, actually. And I started as a volunteer. I have always felt very strongly about the abolition of the death penalty around the world. And I saw an ad that said, "We're looking for volunteers." And I thought, that's great. I'm not entirely sure what area of law I want to practice in, but this should be a great way to start. And what became clear to me was that there weren't very many women actually working in the NGO field at that time. And there were many women who had studied law, but who hadn't necessarily qualified either in their jurisdictions or as barristers or as solicitors. But you certainly also didn't see women in high leadership positions, and Reprieve might have been the exception. The founder was a man called Clive Stafford Smith, but there was a director who was a woman called Inika at the time. And now if you were to look at the website, you could see that it's run exclusively, nearly exclusively by women. There are 2 executive directors who work jointly to run the organization, and the senior leadership team is essentially women. But when I started out, that wasn't the case. I was probably the only Arab woman actually working in the area of human rights in the Middle East and North Africa. And it felt really important to me to represent Arab women, but to also be someone that could potentially show other women from my part of the world that you could do this. And I say that because I'm the only women lawyer in my family. There are men for generations who have been lawyers, but I'm the first lawyer in my family, female lawyer. And I'm quite proud to say that I've convinced several little cousins to seriously consider a career in law. But when I told my family that I wanted to be a lawyer, instinctively they said, excellent, finance, commercial law, make money. And I couldn't. I mean, look, if commercial law is something that really, really intrigues you, please pursue it. But for me, it was important that my career had a purpose. And it wasn't just a purpose for me, it was a purpose for others. And we've heard a lot from other women talk about activism. Activism isn't just about the career path that you choose. It's about what you choose to do with your career as well. And there are small examples in your everyday life where you are advocating for yourself as a woman, as a young girl. And there will be times where you hope that you are potentially providing a seat at the table for women to come. So about halfway through my career, I decided, actually, do you know what? I think I want to practice. I want to be a barrister. And I did that, but it was hard. I was working full-time at Reprieve. I was studying part-time for the bar. And there are still a number of obstacles in the way for women who are coming to the bar, but they have fallen down quite significantly. And I hope that I'm an example to you that if you are looking for a career at the bar, you can do it, even if you feel that it's financially difficult. It was. I had to work full-time and study part-time, but it's fine. Here I am, I've been in practice for several years. And you might be thinking, well, you have two careers or you've had two careers. Don't constrain yourself. It took me a long time to get where I am, and I'm really proud of where I am. I'm really proud of having become one of the first Arab women in a senior leadership role in an NGO that's based in the UK. But don't worry about not knowing exactly what it is that you want to do or taking time to get to where you want to be, because your career paths might change or your aspirations might change or life might get in the way, and that's fine. So advancing the rights of women and girls is not simply just about the tools that we use as lawyers, whether it's advocacy, litigation, campaigning. Sometimes it really just is being the person in the room and being confident and being the person in the room. I would sometimes go to the UN as part of Reprieve, and I would be the only expert on the panel that was a woman. And I would be one of the very few experts on a very particular area of international human rights law. And then when I was thinking about it even more, I realized that when we look at the death penalty, for example, and we look at all of the international law around the death penalty, discussions about how vulnerable women are actually within the criminal justice system, but even particularly within the context of the death penalty, there was absolutely nothing about it. And it became quite clear that the reason for that was that actually, if you were to look historically at all of the famous lawyers around the world that have talked about capital punishment, for example, you might recognize that they are all men predominantly. But that's changing, and that's great. And I could tell you about why you should all want to work towards abolishing the death penalty. But the reason why I say that is, if you want to think about a diverse career in the law, whether it's starting out in the NGO world and then moving towards practicing, most times at law schools there are clinics. And all of those clinics tend to be capital punishment-based clinics. Really do try when you are studying to engage with one of those clinics, because you will learn a diverse skill set. You will see what it's like to work with people within the NGO world, but you'll also get to see what legal skills you would be using in that career. And don't feel like if you want to work in an NGO that you have to be a qualified lawyer. You absolutely don't. If you love the law and if you love justice and if you really truly believe in the cause that you're working for, doesn't matter if you have the title barrister or solicitor, it matters that you care about what you're doing and you're passionate about it. I would say the most important thing though is to always be open to learning and developing your skills and not being afraid to say, this is interesting. Let me go talk to the person that's just had a talk about this. Be brave, be confident, be you. Find mentors, reach out to women that you think are inspirational, because I promise you, we will all answer those messages because we want to see more women take on these inspiring roles. So internships, like I said, I started at Reprieve as an intern and I moved up. Law clinics, engage with them. And like I said, don't worry, don't put too much pressure on yourself at all, because if you want something, you will get it. Now, practical tips. It's hard to say exactly what is the most practical tip to give you to advance your career and to think about a diverse career path. I would say be persistent. I'm Palestinian, I was born stubborn. So if people told me no, I would say, why? Give me a good reason why I can't actually do this. Give me a good reason why I can't actually be the expert on the panel when I've worked several years in this particular field. Don't be afraid to also be yourself, because a lot of the times people will tell you, do you know what, in this particular career, it's only women or people from a particular background that can do this. Well, that's simply not true. And don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. I'm really looking forward actually to the Q&A session. So I'm going to hand over to someone on the, to the young experts.
Thank you so much, Soraya. That was a lovely speech. Our next speaker is Celestine Greenwood, who is a barrister at Exchange Chambers. She has over 25 years experience representing children and over 8 years experience working overseas in conflict areas where she supports women and girls. She also regularly writes about combating violence against girls and women and also delivers training in human rights and other legal topics. And we are very honored to have her here with us today. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Thank you, Sultana. And thank you to all of you for coming. I've got to say, this is a little bit scary. I've actually been a barrister since 1991, which is, I know, probably well before virtually everybody in this room was born. That makes me very old, and I shouldn't be scared about talking to a room of people. But being with all of you, I feel so, what's the right word? Humble. Yeah, humble, let's start with a good word. And I feel so privileged too. I know privilege has already been used, but I'm deeply aware of that. So whilst I'm standing here, sorry, can you all hear me? I've never been very good with these things. In court, it's project to the back. I want to say a little quiet thank you for myself, actually that's worse, to everybody who helped me to be here. I'm not going to go on. Better. Can you hear me at the back? Yes, great, then I'll just talk. All the people that helped me to be here. I'm not going to go on about my journey, but in case be a problem with me. In case it helps any of you, I'm from a very, oh dear, I always feel like I'm supposed to sing now. But a good voice was not one of the gifts I was born with, so don't worry about that. Yes, I don't want to bore you with my story, but in case it helps, I'm from a very working class family. I was the first person in my family to go to university. Back in the day, that was 1987, fees were paid for if your family had a sufficiently low income. So my fees were paid for. Lancashire County Council, where the area I grew up in, they would also give you a maintenance grant if you were from a particularly, not poor, but working class family. And I say that because so many hurdles were in front of me that with help I was able to push down. My mum did extra shifts at work, you know, you name it, the things that people did to get me here. So I just want to say, if I can do it, then I know that each and every one of you in this room can do it. And if you leave here with one thing, one word of wisdom, as it were, one set of words of wisdom from me, it is believe in yourself, right? Even when you think others don't, believe in yourself and follow your passion. So very quickly, I started as a barrister in 1991 and I was in practice then for almost 20 years. And then I saw an advert for a barrister doing my kind of work, which was child abuse, both in the criminal context, so criminal trials, and also in the family court. So should a local authority be able to take a child or children away from their parents because of the harm that they have suffered? And I did that for 19 years. And then I saw this advert for Coram International to go overseas, to go to Tajikistan and to work with girls and young women aged 10 to 18 who had been sexually abused or at risk of it, or who had been trafficked. And I've got to tell you, that was the most fantastic experience of my life. I said to some young women earlier that my experience of life is that whatever I give, I get 100 times more back. And working with those girls and just being part of their journey back to recovery was simply so rewarding. After that, I was doing a part-time master's in development. And in Tajikistan, though, I met the man who's now my husband, John. God bless him, because again, I wouldn't be here without his help. I suffer greatly with imposter syndrome, and he always reminds me how special, to some people at least, I am. Then we got married. I went to Fiji, where I worked for a human rights program. And that was fabulous. That again was all based around girls and women, writing legislation to combat violence against women, doing training with lawyers, judges, parliamentarians on human rights before Afghanistan. I usually can't say this without getting tears in my eyes. There I was privileged enough to work on programs supporting girls and women. Well, it was heartbreaking on the 15th of August 2019 to see what was going on, and certainly heartbreaking now to know that all that work that we put in, all that progress, all that bravery that those girls and women had shown, sadly, has come to nothing, and if anything, is many steps back. So that's why we need you, right? Not just for the girls and women of Afghanistan, but for all of us. That's why you're here, and that's why it's such a privilege to talk to you. Now, we were asked to give you some tips, and skills. Obviously, they're the hard skills. There's knowledge, there's learning, there's being analytical, all those kind of things. But I'm going to go back to my favorite word, passion, because you and the special things about you are what really counts. So always bring yourself to everything you do, and don't be afraid of showing people that, because each one of us is given different talents, as I just said. I'd love to be, well, it's not Taylor Swift. I'm more, Madonna's more at my age group, as you can tell by my grey hair as well as a stringy neck like hers, but never mind. Yes, I'd love to be able to sing like Madonna, but that's not what I was supposed to do. And I do believe that each one of us has a path that we're given, whether you believe in God or the universe. But I would say don't give up, because in my experience, life has a habit of taking you exactly where you're supposed to be. So I would say in answer to that, my journey was not planned. I fell into so many of the things, the wonderful things that have happened to me. So advice, yes, have a plan. As a barrister, I'm sure Sultana will agree, there's plan A, there's plan B, and there's plan C. And there's usually more than that, because if we plan, then we've covered everything that might go wrong. But be flexible. Take the opportunities that come in front of you. Make sure you are up to date in your chosen area of passion. So whether that is the death penalty, or prisons, as you're going to hear about from Vicki, or it's violence against women and girls, whatever it is. Read everything you can, go to every event you can, and please learn how to network. I'm really bad at it. So my husband is a diplomat, and we go to these fancy events together. And we'll go in, and he is Mr. Social Butterfly. He's there meeting everybody. And everybody's laughing and joking because he's so funny and lovely. And then we come out at the end and he says, so who did you meet? So let's say Sultana was there, and I'll say, well, Sultana was there. So I spent the whole evening talking to Sultana because I'm not very good at being the, hi, I'm Celeste, nice to meet you. Try to get over that early because it's taken me a very long time to gain that confidence. People are interested in you, and here's a trick. If it's somebody older that you're talking to, ask them about their family. I learned this from a lady who's now a judge, and she said, oh yeah, the way I deal with the old judges, I ask them about their children, because invariably they've got children, they're happy to talk about themselves, and then when the conversation ends, they think, oh, wasn't that Celeste a nice young lady? So networking, but don't forget, you're developing networks all the time. So the people you're at university with, whether they're your best friends or not, stay in touch because you can help each other along the way. Networks you'll develop when you start work, whether that's practicing law or working for an NGO. And collaboration. Right? I'm a fully fledged feminist now. It took me a long time to get there because I didn't think I'd suffered any real discrimination. But then it was brought to my attention what feminism is and how virtually everybody in this room then has been out of the system. Because my version of feminism looks at the world this way, that a lot of the institutions and the laws that govern our lives were made by men, and not just any group of men, but by a particularly small privileged group of white men. So I'm not included. You're not included either. But together, if we collaborate in the true spirit of feminism, we can make a difference. So I'm looking at the clock because as a barrister, I want to go on a bit, you know, give me the microphone, I'll talk a lot. So I just want to say to you, repeating myself, I know, but find your passion, follow your passion, be brave. I'm sure many of you know that definition. What is courage? Right? Courage isn't the lack of fear. Courage is being afraid, but doing it anyway. So when the challenges come, and some will beat you, but pick yourself up off the floor and fight, because tomorrow is another day, and there are lots of people out there who need your help. And my final word, because most of you are women, is can I say this? Be kind to each other. There's so much about this world that puts us up against one another. And there's so many things that you'll do, so many paths that you'll take that will put you in competition with one another. But if we stand together, we are much stronger than we are individually. And if we don't let those societal pressures divide us, we'll be stronger. So be kind to one another, smile at one another, give each other a helping hand. Now, I have a rule that if I see a woman that I think looks particularly attractive, or she's wearing a nice coat or something, I always make a point of saying, because I don't think we hold each other up enough. So again, second thing, if you take away anything else from me today, it is be kind to one another, give each other a helping hand. So thank you for listening to me at this point. I'll be quiet for now and look forward to Vicki giving you her words of wisdom.
Just to check, okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Celestine. I think you're as inspiring as Madonna or Taylor Swift. Our next speaker will be Vicki Prais. She's a human rights lawyer and an independent human rights consultant with 27 years of experience in the sector. She has a particular expertise in human rights of prisoners, and she works with various organizations to research and document human rights violations, design and deliver training, and advocate on human rights issues. So, come on.
Thank you very much, everybody. I hope, can you hear me right at the back? So my intervention starts actually not with me telling you about what I've done, but with a story. And it takes us to a prison in Japan, in Tokyo, actually, where we're visiting a woman, let's call her Caroline. She's a British national, she's detained there. She's an older woman and she's frail. She speaks no Japanese at all. And she's in a wheelchair and she's suffering from declining dementia. And we visit her in a small room. There's a glass panel and behind her is quite a stern-looking prison officer. And we are there to ensure that she's safe, that she's well, and that her human rights are being protected. As you can well imagine, she is extremely vulnerable. This is what human rights work can look like. This was part of my human rights journey as a human rights advisor to the Foreign Office, where I was advising Foreign Office staff on human rights issues affecting British nationals detained overseas. My second opening remark is an invitation, and it's an invitation to you all to join our human rights family. I genuinely believe, and I say this really genuinely, I genuinely believe that there is a place for everybody in the human rights world. It may take time, it'll take resilience, it'll take courage, everything that you've heard from my colleagues here, and it will take damn hard work to get there. But there is a place for you in the human rights world. My own journey has been weird and wonderful, I think I can say. And I've been incredibly fortunate to work in lots of different parts of the human rights world, from the British government, as you heard there, to the UN, to the Council of Europe, to the Scottish Human Rights Commission, to non-governmental organisations, Amnesty International, Penal Reform International. And I like to say that London is home, but the world is my workplace. This is where my base is for me, but I work all over. Like Celeste, there has been no plan, there has been no design, there's been no path. And it's not something that I necessarily advocate, but I've taken each and every opportunity that's come my way. And believe me, there have been aberrations in my career. Doing procurement at the Council of Europe was a slight aberration, but it's been a learning experience nonetheless. I see myself not as a lawyer, but as a lawyer plus. I'm a lawyer plus an academic. I'm a lawyer plus a trainer. I'm a lawyer plus a sometimes speechwriter. I'm a lawyer plus a human rights career coach. So I wear many hats, but I suppose at the heart, I'm a lawyer is what I do. Each and every role has brought me something, and I hope that that's the same for you. Each and every role has grown my subject matter expertise, has grown my skill sets, and has grown my human rights family. So please think about that when you are thinking about where to go in your human rights path. And what I would like to say is, and I say this very openly and very honestly, that this work has been stressful, draining, emotionally demanding. I haven't suffered burnout, but I was perhaps close to it at times in terms of the work. But my intervention today is really not about me, it's about you and offering you skills, advice and insights into what human rights work can look like. I just wanted to kind of share with you a few skills and assets and then just 5 or 6 or so top tips for you. Firstly, again, what you've heard from my colleagues here, you need to care about this work because it's going to affect you and it's going to touch you very, very deeply. So I know that might sound really obvious, but you need to have a motivation and a commitment to social justice. Then thinking about the non-conventional qualities that we need. Well, we need to have curiosity, passion, empathy, dedication, patience, optimism. All of these are core skills that we need to succeed and to do the work that we so want to do as human rights professionals. You need tenacity and resilience. And I say that in 2 ways. Being tenacious in a job search, because you will get rejections. And I say that quite bluntly, you will get rejections, but you need to pick yourself up and be tenacious. But you also need to be tenacious in the nature and the work that we do. We are challenging governments. We're saying to governments and calling them out. So you need to be tenacious in terms of that. And we will get only small wins sometimes, but we need to persevere. And we need resilience, and we need physical and mental resilience for this work, because as I say, it can be very hard and very draining. We could be out in an isolated part of the world doing our work, but it's also very tough emotionally. We think back to, if I think back to the people that I've worked with, those that I've represented before the immigration and asylum courts, interviewing survivors of torture, this work touches us deeply. So please know that you need to be resilient to do this work. I wanted to offer some top tips of advice. What can you be doing right as of now when you leave this room today to help build and grow your human rights profile, work, and advocacy? The first piece of advice that I can offer is work backwards. And I'm thinking work backwards. So I'm inviting you to think about, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years' time? Where do you want to be in terms of a role? Where do you want to be in terms of an organization? What kind of organization? And where in the world do you want to be? Because the world can be your oyster when it comes to human rights work. And think about 3 things. What subject matter expertise do you need to get there? What do you need to know about in terms of your subject matter expertise? Think about the skills and assets that you need to grow and develop to help you get to where you want to be. And think about, who do you need to connect with? How do you build your human rights family? These 3 sort of things will help you in terms of your human rights journey and plotting your path. And please know that plotting your path is advisable. The second point that I can offer is building your human rights family and your circle of opportunity. So doing all that you can right now to optimize that. We've spoken a little bit about networking. It's not a word that I like to use, because you're talking to a shy British woman who's had to get out on her own as an independent human rights consultant and build and grow networks. But if it's done well, it can be magical. If it's done well, it can bring a huge amount of people and opportunities into your world. So think about networking, not as networking, but as relationship building. You are building those relationships which will carry you through in your human rights career. And think about networking not only in person, and it's great that we can do that, but also in the digital space as well. And I'm a huge advocate, lover of LinkedIn, and I was talking to Celeste about this, how much I spend time on LinkedIn. It can be your best ally in terms of building and growing your human rights family. But also thinking about networking with a bit of intention behind it. What do you want to get out of that engagement, that relationship? It may be connecting somebody in a particular organization. It may be building up your knowledge and expertise, or it may just be growing your family there. The other point on this is get comfortable with informational interviews. Now, it's not something that we're kind of very au fait with here, but across the pond in the US and North America, people are always asking for informational interviews with people in organizations where they'd like to work. You're not asking for a job. You're not asking for anything more than that. Please tell me about your journey. How did you get to where you got to? What should I be doing as of now? So asking for people for those informational interviews is a great step, I think, to helping you. Thirdly, thinking about building your thought leadership in this area, starting to craft yourself as a mini expert in the human rights field, in your particular field. Now, I'm not asking you to write a huge tome for the Harvard Law Journal. If you want to, please do. But writing a blog, a 500 to 700 word, it's not a heavy lift, but it starts to get you thinking critically about human rights issues that affect you. So there are lots of places that you can do that, going back to your university and seeing if there's a place, a space where you can write, or self-publishing an article on LinkedIn, or more conventional platforms like Jurist or the Oxford Human Rights Hub. These are just a few places that will accept submissions. But building that publication portfolio at an early stage and an early moment shows that you're a thinker about your area. And you can say at interview, well, actually, I've written about women and girls in Uganda or wherever it may be. So really, it helps for you to stand out. As has been mentioned before, building your knowledge, building your deep knowledge on that particular subject that interests you. And how do you do that? Signing up for specialized training, connecting, as we said, to thought leaders. So when you go to lectures, sit in the front, always sit in the front, connect with people, go up to them at the end of the talk and say, I really liked what you spoke about. Can I connect with you? Can I help you? Can I support you in some way or other? So be there, be visible, and be at the front of the room in terms of that, and knowing your sector and connecting with people. thinking about human rights on the side, what I would call the experience dividend, right? Sort of building up your experience in the sector, an area that really interests you. I would always advocate for paid positions. There's a real issue in our sector about unpaid internships, and that's a conversation for another day. But there's no reason why you should not be paid and remunerated for the work that you do as young professionals. Don't necessarily go for the big names either. Go for those organizations where you can really be a value add, where you can add something to it, but also think about it as a two-way street. Not only are you giving to that organization, but you are getting back something from them as well in terms of building up your skills, your assets, and your human rights family. So think very carefully and strategically about what you want that human rights experience to be for you. And then be very clear about how much time you can give, right? If you can only give 2 hours a month, you can only give 2 hours a month, but you give that with your whole heart. So don't bite off more than you can chew, because organizations will gladly grab you and exploit you. So please know how much you can give. So I ask you now, what's holding you back? When you leave the room, go out and look for interesting opportunities. And my final piece of advice to you is this. It's to build your board of advisors. So what do I mean by your board of advisors? I'm thinking about cheerleaders, allies, space makers, mentors, and coaches. It's very, very difficult to go it alone in our sector. And I speak from very personal experience now out on my own as an independent consultant. I couldn't do that without building the family that I have around me. So I invite you now at this early stage to build your own board of advisors. And we need them at all stages and at all moments of our career. The cheerleaders and the allies are those people who are there to celebrate you and to support you on your journey. And you need those people because this work is hard and this work is difficult. The space makers are those people who talk about you when you're not in the room. And they can be in organizations where you'd like to be, and they speak on your behalf, they advocate for you, and they mentor you into those positions, into those places. The mentors in our lives are those people who walk alongside us on this journey. They offer us impartial advice, they offer us guidance, they offer us a lending ear and support. And I would encourage you to find those as early on as you can. And that usually is quite a long-term relationship, actually, and it can be a really beautiful and lovely relationship. And then there are those people who are coaches like myself. I'm a human rights careers coach, one of the many hats that I wear, and I help people in very tangible, meaningful ways with interview preparation, personal branding, CV and cover letters. But coaches are there to really help you to parachute in, to help you think about a particular issue and guide you through. So I would really encourage you to look for that board of advisors and build up your community and board of advisors. I am going to leave my intervention there, and I look forward to your questions, to your ask, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That was very useful, especially those practical tips. I found those very useful. Next, we have Katrina Filmer, who is the Pro Bono Senior Associate at Field Fisher. She works with both charities and fee earners to identify suitable projects for the firm. She is a public lawyer by background and has been working primarily in disability rights. She has also represented numerous children at the Special Educational Needs and Disability Tribunal. So please can we welcome her.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Field Fisher today. Like Justina, I'm going to start with the book, but not plugging my own. Where I want to start is with a children's book, Equal to Everything, which is a book about Lady Hale, the first female president of our Supreme Court. This book was written a couple of years ago, after Lady Hale stepped down from the Supreme Court in recognition of her life, and she was asked to choose cases that would be highlighted in the book. The cases that she chose highlight the very reason we're here today, to discuss the fundamental role of equality and human rights within our justice system, and in particular, the importance in furthering women's rights. They include a case about equal pay for women that she sat and heard, preventing the separation of a mother from her children in an immigration case, and the case of Elaine McDonald, a ballerina who features in the book here. Elaine was my client, She was a former prima donna ballerina with the Royal Ballet Company and then artistic director at the Scottish Ballet Company. And then she had a stroke in 1999, which left her with a number of physical disabilities. And as a result of that, Elaine required support from social services to assist in living independently, and that included assistance in going to the toilet. After cuts to council budgets in 2010, Elaine was told she would no longer get assistance with toileting at night, but instead, as Lady Hale says in this book, would be required to wear nappies. Elaine and her partner were understandably horrified by this suggestion and wanted to challenge it. And as a result, I found myself in the Supreme Court and subsequently the European Court of Human Rights shortly after qualifying as a solicitor. And to say that I had imposter syndrome would be an understatement. That case was not a case that we ever thought would reach that level. It came to me as a very straightforward community care case, where I was working as a legal aid lawyer at a time in a law centre, hence why it was given to the new girl. But over the course of the years, it became into something much different and much more important than we perhaps had realised at the beginning. So how did I find myself there? Well, like a lot of my colleagues on this panel, I didn't necessarily set out to be a lawyer. I was going to be a psychologist, and that was my original undergraduate degree. However, I started working with disabled children and teenagers, mostly those with learning disabilities, and I discovered that there were all these rights that disabled people, and in particular young women, had or should have, but often didn't. And that's what led me to return to law school, and then subsequently worked, as I said, as a legal aid lawyer, and then went in-house into a number of NGOs, all within disability rights. And why have I done this? Well, it is because of passion, like it's been spoken about before. Whatever you decide to do, like a lot of people have said already, find something that sparks your interest. Human rights encompasses a huge range of issues. It's about our everyday life. So whether that's family rights, access to education, human dignity, as it was in Elaine's case. And I found something that sparked my interest, disability rights, but also how NGOs can use the law to affect a change, what people often refer to as strategic litigation. And that's what I've spent a number of years of my life doing. Like Vicki's just said, it's not always easy, and you often you get little wins, or in some cases, no wins at all. Our Supreme Court case failed spectacularly, which is why we ended up at the European Court. And currently, I'm now working very slowly on cases involving young people who've been detained in assessment and treatment units who have learning disability, and the human rights abuses that they are facing there. Those are cases that I've been chipping away at for a number of years. And whilst we've had some individual successes, I had the case of Beth, which received some media coverage a couple of years ago, who was held in seclusion for 2 years at a mental health institution with no access to education. And eventually, after 3 years, we were able to get Beth out into the community, where she's living a very happy life with her guinea pigs. But 2,000 other people remain detained in those units. And so we continue to chip away, sometimes with success and sometimes it's not. So it is important to have something that sparks your interest to get you through those days where things are not going as you hoped. Tips, well, I think a lot of my colleagues have covered them already. I would add, be curious about the area. As we said, human rights covers a lot of different areas of interest, and take the opportunities that you can, as other people have said, volunteer with NGOs. I volunteer with Teenagers with Learning Disability, represented children in a tribunal, drop-in advice clinics. I'm now a pro bono lawyer, so I'm going to give a big plug to any pro bono work, but particularly when you are at university, those are great experiences. And I remember thinking when I was doing that work that it wasn't necessarily, I couldn't see how that was going to necessarily further my career, but it's amazing when you go back and look at it now, you think, well, actually, those are all my building blocks that got me there. Those give you great experience, both in the law, but some of those skills around working with individual clients, and just really understanding the area that you want to work in. I highly recommend, if you can, volunteering to work with policy teams in-house at NGOs. That's where I did a lot of my work in-house, working very closely, and learned a huge amount, because I was also working at the end where people were lobbying for either new legislation or changes to legislation, and I'm sitting at the other end once that's fixed, trying to use that legislation to argue for particular rights. And if you're interested in particular subjects, sign up to the blogs, chambers, NGOs to be kept up to date in that. And finally, just do what you're doing now, just keep utilising these opportunities and use your knowledge to spread legal education. One of the things we haven't spoken about this morning yet is, as you will be well aware, human rights as a legal profession has been under attack that hasn't been seen in a way before in this country, and that's in part to the misinformation that's spread about its purpose. So whatever you can do to play your part in countering those arguments to protect it for the future, I would very much encourage you to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Katrina, for sharing your journey and for sharing the tips. They are so useful for us that are in early careers. And now our next speaker is Eleanor Thompson. She is online. She's an international human rights lawyer and a public interest lawyer and, sorry for my English, lawyer and policy advocate, passionate about finding solutions to social justice problems. She has worked extensively on human rights, rule of law, and justice at national, regional, and global levels for over 15 years. Board chairs for She Can, We Can, manager of a female football club, and she guides young female leaders in Sierra Leone. So applause for her.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be with you all, even though it's virtually. I hope that you can hear me. I can't really hear the sound in the room, but I'm sure you'll let me know if you cannot hear me. My fellow panelists have really covered a lot, and so I will try to focus on some other things that help kind of give an understanding of varied experiences in the human rights field and various career pathways, as well as some tips for you all as young lawyers. Where I'd like to start is breaking a myth or an idea that being a lawyer is defined by wearing a wig and gown and going to court. Lawyering is really a set of skills. It is a toolbox that you can deploy and utilize in almost any pathway that you choose. So I became a lawyer because of an encounter with a child soldier on the streets of Freetown, Sierra Leone. Freetown is the capital of Sierra Leone, during Sierra Leone's civil war. And this was when this encounter happened when I was a teenager. As I was walking by this boy who was dressed in military fatigues and was carrying this large gun, he stared me down while clenching that gun, as if sending me a message that the power to kill lay in his hands. And I realized then that as a society, we had failed that boy and in turn, a generation of young citizens. After that, I wanted to become a lawyer. Certainly not to wear a hot, stuffy wig and gown, or to be called barrister or lawyer or any of the other titles that people like to give us. But I wanted to become a lawyer because I wanted to use the law as a tool for addressing what seemed like one of the worst social injustices imaginable, which was, to me, the destruction of our children's futures. And that led me on a path through NGOs, through, studying human rights academically, through working for various NGOs, and also to becoming a lawyer who's licensed to practice both in the United States and in Sierra Leone. But my social justice and human rights advocacy path really came full circle recently when the local government in where I live in Sierra Leone, with no community consultation, leased the land where the community's only public school and communal space is to build a church. And so this is my community. This is where I live. This is where my mother came from. It's an underprivileged community. And so as an American born and raised Sierra Leonean who has higher education and socioeconomic privilege, that though earned is still there, I am using my knowledge of the law to fight for the children in the same community where my mother came from, and the same underprivileged community where she got her start. For me, that in itself is the epitome of why I do what I do and why I am a human rights lawyer and a public interest lawyer. But I think my story also indicates that there's no one single path. As you'll hear, I've never done anything a traditional way in terms of my career development. And as a human rights practitioner, I have applied human rights law to protect women and girls in different streams of my career as a lawyer. So as a barrister in Sierra Leone, I have represented a young female public servant who, after being assaulted, was brought up for administrative action. So I represented her to in an application for judicial review, which ended up setting a precedent in terms of some jurisprudence in Sierra Leone. But it was a means of protecting the rights of women in the workplace. As an NGO professional, I've infused human rights and the rights of women and girls into working with paralegals and communities in Sierra Leone to ensure that women not only have equal land rights, but also that they can realize those rights in practice. As a legal reformer, I have co-drafted laws, including two recent new land laws that specifically ensure women's equal rights to land, and that there's a percentage of women represented in land decision-making bodies at all levels in the country. And as an international human rights lawyer, I have utilized strategic litigation, mainly in regional human rights courts, to try to challenge the government's use of laws like loitering laws, which disproportionately target women and the poor, and also to push the government to ensure that there's a ban on female genital mutilation. And I went through all of these to show both how one's legal career can manifest in different ways, but also the crucial role of human rights law in advancing women and girls' rights. And so in terms of what this means for you as you are, embarking on your career, the early stages of your careers, I'll share a few tips. I won't repeat what any of my colleagues have said, I'll share a few additional tips. One, especially for those who are working with communities. It is incredibly important that you go about your work understanding cultural sensitivities and competence beyond just what the law says. There has to be a connection with those with whom you're working. So for instance, getting those women's rights provisions in the new land laws that I mentioned and doing female genital mutilation advocacy is not easy in societies where you're up against patriarchy, you're up against notions that things are done a certain way because of culture, and usually those notions are generally anti-women and girls. And so it requires understanding how to appeal to or how to engage, let me put it that way, those who are both allies and those who you may initially see as foes, who want systems to remain the same, who have an interest in maintaining systems that really don't work to the advantage of women and girls, and helping them to see how changes in those systems, including gradual changes, can benefit them as well. For instance, in the land laws, we showed how women were the largest percentage of land users, and therefore ensuring that women are able to realize their land rights is actually beneficial at a family level for everyone, including men, as well as at a societal level. I'd also like to give some tips for those who don't live in places where opportunities abound, whether it's in the human rights field or even outside of a traditional legal career, and places where those opportunities don't just fall in your lap. You will have to seek out and in some cases create opportunities yourself. So what does that mean? For a non-traditional career, you likewise have to think outside of the box. You have to help others see how you bring knowledge or skills that are useful to them. And that may even, those may even seem unrelated to them initially. You have to be the one to draw the connections. You have to show why they are the asset why you are the asset that they need. And especially in this social media age, I mean, there are many platforms for getting your knowledge and expertise out there. Some of us, are a bit more private and probably don't like to share a lot of ourselves publicly. But I think social media provides a platform for you to also control what you share and what you choose not to. You're able to craft the narrative, and that can be very useful. Also, a lot has been said about networking. There's a very traditional idea of how networking is done that can be very scary for some of us. I hear you, Celestine. And as an introvert myself, one thing that's been very important in terms of, I don't even think of it as networking, but just being myself. So it's important for you to be yourself. You are fascinating as an individual, and you can find something to discuss, especially if it's not, career related or business related. Vicki spoke about building your board of advisors. I second that. And it's not about, having people around you who are popular or have big names. They are people who truly have your interest at heart, who you can, whose advice you trust, and who will pour into you, whether it's professionally, yes, saying your name in rooms when you're not there, or who will pour into you mentally, right? If you're having doubts, if you're feeling imposter syndrome, who see what's special about you and thus help to build your confidence. There are also things that you take for granted that you will have to advocate for, especially if you are working with any corporate structure. And when I say corporate structure, that is not just restricted to law firms. NGOs are also corporate structures. And so there are things that you may have to advocate for that you think should be givens. For instance, non-discrimination policies and practices, safeguarding policies and practices, and even in some cases, basic respect. And that's really unfortunate, but I think it's also important that we understand the reality of entering the workforce as women. It's important to volunteer and do internships to get experience, especially where you're trying to pursue a passion. But also don't allow yourself to be exploited. You have to start advocating for yourself from the start. So that may mean, and that may be very subtle, that may mean ensuring that you don't become the one who does all the domestic office work, for instance. So even in a human rights NGO, you may be always the one asked to take notes, whereas male counterparts don't have to. Recognizing those type of things and finding skillful ways of navigating them. For instance, asking others on a male colleague on another occasion to do it, or volunteering for a different kind of role within that organization. It's also going to be important, as others have said, to lift up other women in the workplace or communities in which you work. And we are in positions where we are privileged in many ways. And that privilege should not mean closing the doors for others. Rather, it should mean opening the doors for other women who are following in the paths that maybe we're creating or that we're following. And two last points. One is about ensuring that you are maintaining some balance. Lawyers are notorious for suffering from depression and even alcoholism. The things we deal with are very demanding. The work we do is very demanding. And then as human rights lawyers, we also take on a lot of trauma. People's trauma, sometimes our own. It's important to recognize that and find ways to, care for yourself and your own mental health. But you will be a better lawyer and a better you if you continue to feed your passions. And that's also part of maintaining that balance. And the last thing I'll leave you with is that it's okay if you don't have it all figured out right now. I hope that some of you breathed a sigh of relief when I said that. I wonder how many of our panelists had it all figured out early in their careers. Yes, you have to be intentional about pursuing opportunities, like I said, especially if you're not in a traditional career path, but even if you are, you have to be very intentional. Opportunities are usually not going to just fall in your lap, but you also should be open to learning and growing and making mistakes. And that is how you will develop in your career and in your practice. I'll leave it there and turn it back over to our wonderful moderators.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. That was very, very insightful. And we have just a bit of time for some questions. So if you have any questions, put your hand up and someone will come to you with a microphone. There's one at the back there.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all so much. My name's Anissa Latouche. I had two questions, if that's okay. Okay, yeah. Sorry, hi. Thank you guys so much. So my first question, you spoke quite a bit about the need for community and support in a career such as being a human rights lawyer, human rights barrister. I am going to be doing my law conversion and then bar and then pupillage, hopefully. And thinking about that and the fact that chambers are not what they used to be in terms of the physical presence, that because of the changing landscape of the job, people go to chambers a lot less than they used to. How would you advise that a young barrister actually builds that network and support system and community amongst each other?
Let's barristers answer that one.
Sure. I think I've pressed the right button, but can you hear me all right? Great. So when I essentially really got into my practice, COVID had already set in. And so in reality, people were not going to chambers at all because we couldn't. But what you will find is that there is a community at court. The more that you go to court, the more you will see people in roving rooms. Sultana is telling me I'm going to angle this way. You know, in roving rooms, you will meet people who are not necessarily in chambers, but of your year of call or very similar year of call, and you will simply build that network around you. And as things come to be more online for everything, you'll see that there are many barristers who have an online presence on X or other social media platforms. You'll start to see that you'll start building an online connection with people as well who are in the profession, who may be talking about topics that you're interested in or working in areas that you're interested in. And you start building almost an online network, and you will be very pleased to see that you end up meeting them in real life and it becomes an actual physical network of people. It grows very organically. The best way to build your allies and to build that network around you is, you know, people who are interested in the same thing that you are, people who are similar years of call, but also people who you view as mentors. Just don't be embarrassed to reach out to them, because the world has changed since COVID and there will always be opportunities for you to create those networks and to create that board, as Vicki said.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I agree with everything that Soraya has just said. I would add, I'm not sure about down in London, but certainly out on what we call the circuits, which is everywhere that isn't London effectively. We have these things called bar mess, which is basically some fancy or perhaps not so fancy name for dinners where we get together. Now, it sounds a bit very old-fashioned, but I would certainly say go. In my experience, they turn into very fun events. It's not quite so stuck up and stuffy as it sounds like it might be. Definitely go to that. You'll find that there are lots of groups at the bar. So there is a young bar group. I'm not quite sure if that's the title name of it. And there are lots of different groups that cater to the different backgrounds that we all have. So obviously that's another avenue for you to get to know people. I would also say during pupillage, and you might feel that this is difficult to do, but times are changing. So I would say push it. Don't spend all your time with your pupil supervisor. Now that's something in my experience that tends to differ between chambers, and then within chambers, different people. So when I have been a pupil supervisor,
We usually have a system where for so many weeks the person is with me, but I will find a pupil supervisor that perhaps does all crime so that my pupils get to see both sides of it. And certainly my practice has always been to spend time with them, to take them out, to meet up with other people who have got pupils as well, so that we're forming our own little group, and that way we can exchange knowledge and experiences. But I do agree, it's an organic thing. Don't stress about it, it will come. And you will find that you spend time with people who are like-minded, do similar kinds of work. And I think I can say I've never had an instructing solicitor, so sorry, that's jargon, a solicitor that sends me work, that I have not ended up being friends with, because that's just how it goes. So as I say, don't stress, the work finds you. And when senior people said that to me, I'm not quite sure what that means, but it happens, you'll find your own niche. Like when I started, for example, I didn't want to do family work, but it found me. I understand why it did. So I say, don't stress, just take the opportunities that you can. I really would say that. Learn from me. I was very shy, and as I say, I don't like putting myself out there. Take every opportunity, because even if it doesn't work out, you will learn something from it. Okay, I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, it did. I actually had another question that leads on to. You, Vicki, Eleanor, you all spoke about how you have instances of feeling quite shy or nervous or being introverts on varying scales. How have you navigated that in a career where you have to use your voice so much?
So exactly right. I started out on my own totally in the back end of 2019. And I just took a deep breath and I just said, I'm going to do this for better or for worse. And then COVID hit. But what I did very intentionally and with great passion was to create a consultant family around me of people who I could learn from, who I could support and they could support me. But I've had to be my own marketeer. I've had to be my own PR person. I've had to do that. But, you know, if you get out there, things come back to you, but you just have to be brave, take a deep breath and go for it, I think is what I'd say to that. Yeah.
I actually live with quite severe anxiety. And so what I would say is something that my husband tells me all the time is like really question what you're feeling anxious about, because sometimes that can hold you back. And he tells me like, actually, are you really excited about the opportunity that's in front of you? Is it actually just that, you know, you're really looking forward to something and you don't know how to channel those particular emotions? It's not actually anxiety. And if you can find something positive to channel that emotion into, then you know you change your view a little bit. Just it's okay to just be patient with yourself. It's fine.
Thank you so, sorry.
No, I was just saying, I would add to that.
I would just add.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there's a phrase, fake it till you make it. I've done that quite a bit over the years. And certainly in court, it's always a performance. So I don't have to be me. I'm Celeste, the barrister, not who I really am. And I think what gets me through is that I believe in the justice of what I'm doing, even though at times I might be on the wrong side of a case. And by that, I mean, I might be representing someone that has raped a child, and I know, or I rather suspect that the evidence shows that that person has, but that person is still entitled to be represented properly. So it's that gets you through and makes you get up and do it. Like I said before about courage, it's not the absence of fear. It's acknowledging that and saying, but what I'm about to do is way more important than the fear that I feel. Sorry, Eleanor.
Oh no, thank you for sharing that, Celeste. For me, I had to move away from the performative, or thinking about it as performative, and more, how can I be my authentic self, which is someone who doesn't have to say something all the time, or doesn't have to be in the forefront, but knowing when using my voice is going to make a difference and is going to have an impact. So rather than thinking about quantity and how much I'm sort of out there, and thinking more about quality of the use of my voice when telling my story could make a difference. When there's someone else who can't speak and my voice has to help or encourage or or advocate for someone else. That's how I've been able to manage my introversion and being an advocate.
Okay, I think that answers the question. Sorry, Eleanor, do you have more to say, or did you accidentally mute yourself?
Oh, I'm done. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Do we have any more questions? Oh, we have two at the back.
Hi, I'm Sarika. I'm a second year non-law undergrad, and I want to hopefully become a barrister and then go down that entire path. One of the biggest questions that I had, and this came up a lot in terms of, like networking and building your board of advisors as such. One of the biggest fears that I have is like when meeting really cool, impressive lawyers such as yourselves and networking and speaking at these events. The fear is when, following up on that and then translating that into getting advice, getting mentorship. One of my biggest fears is that I'm inconveniencing you because I know how busy a career as a lawyer is, and especially senior ones, especially when in human rights and different things like that. One of the biggest issues is like assessing how willing a lawyer is to actually go back and forth with you, how much you can really reach out to them. So I guess my main question is, how do you kind of build that sort of long-term relationship with lawyers and ensure that you're not like overdoing it or, and you're able to get as much from them without inconveniencing them, basically. That's my question.
I can definitely start with that one because I think that's probably you a number of years ago. I mean, firstly, I would say that it's very much up to the individual lawyer to kind of assess how much time they can give. I don't think it's up to you to, and as I'm sure some of the panelists have already said, we're always very happy to speak to up and coming lawyers. I mean, this is where the next generation is going to come, but it's very much up to me to then set those boundaries as to what I think I can manage. So I would just say, I think particularly as women, we can think of ourselves as being problematic or intrusive. I was saying to a friend of mine this morning that I was very nervous about speaking here, and she said, just think about my husband who knows nothing about your subject area, and we just go, yeah, I'll give it a go. And it's true. So I think you just need to just put yourself out there and be unapologetic, and people will just say no if they haven't got the time.
Yeah, I would second that. What I was saying before there about sort of, you might have to reach out to 20 or 30 people to get 3 people coming back to you and saying, yes, I'll walk alongside you, I'll be your mentor. But I think, as you said, exactly right, setting that mentorship relationship really early on in the exchange, and saying, well, maybe I can check in with you every 3 months. Maybe I can, email you with an update and things like that. And the mentor will know how much they can give and how much they can offer. And don't be shy in coming forward, because we will answer, we will respond, we will engage. It may take us a bit of time to do so, but we'll get there, because we want to support you. We want to help you find, the route for you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
So may I just give a word of advice on the back of that? I do agree, but the point about, I think Katrina said about her friend saying, well, my husband would just go for it. To the point about imposter syndrome, my husband pointed out to me a long time ago, because I wouldn't apply for something, and he said, why? You've got 8 out of the 10 skills. Yeah, but I haven't got the whole 10. And he said, well, you need to realise that men looking at this opportunity, they'll apply even if they've only got 3. Right, and they'll blag the rest of it. So don't be put off Go for things, believe in yourself, and as you said, yes, don't think you have to be perfect. And to the point about help, most of us will, right? Those who don't, forget about them, but most of us take the view, certainly that I do. So many people help me to be here. It is my duty as well as absolute pleasure to help others to get to where they want to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. For your...
I'll just add really quickly that I think you already said it, that it's a long-term relationship. And so that means that you shouldn't expect right off the bat that all of a sudden, you know, you're going to get something from this person. And I think the less transactional it feels, the more likely you're going to build that mentorship relationship in the long run. It's not just a one-way thing. The mentors that I have, our relationship is sort of mutually fulfilling, in the sense that we learn from each other. And for us as lawyers and practice, you're never too old or have too much experience to learn more. So I would say don't approach it sort of expecting right off the bat. Think of it more as a slow burn in developing that relationship.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your questions. I don't think we have time for any more, and we'll have to move on.
Yeah, we're about to go into a break now. You'll be there's tea, coffee, biscuits at the back, and then we'll come back for the fireside chat. If I can very quickly add to what's been said about networking, you'll have a chance at lunchtime and at the end of the day to network. So there'll be lots and lots of lawyers coming down during lunch and at the end of the day, in particular at the end of the day, from Field Fisher. There'll be lots of networks, women's networks, various social mobility networks, and so you'll have an opportunity to speak to them and put your questions to them. Networking is about building meaningful relationships. It's not about fleeting around the room and saying hi to 95 people, because nobody will remember you. So if you're in a room like this with this many people, think about how you can communicate with 3 or 4 people in a meaningful way, where you can then start the beginnings of developing a relationship with them. In terms of finding a mentor or whether you're going to be a nuisance, ask and don't disappear. I get inundated with requests for mentoring or help with X, Y, and Z. I don't have the time to personally chase everybody that wants it. It's in your interest to pursue that particular mentor. And at some point, it may be they don't respond to your first 3 emails or first 3 requests, but they will by the 4th one. Okay, so do pursue it, be persistent, and don't make it a one-way relationship, i.e. just give me this. Or you're applying for pupillage and last minute, the night before you send it to a barrister to review, they will have their own work that they need to get done. So be considerate also of your mentor, and they will be considerate of you, and build a lasting relationship. If you do well, make the point of telling them you've done well. You know, you've scored an interview, you've got pupillage, you know, you've got a scholarship. Let them know. I've been in a position where I have coached people and then they don't tell me, and I'm wondering, well, what's happened? Was it effective or not? And it's nice to get feedback, because when I mentor, I always see it as a 2-way relationship, that I like the person and I hope they like me, and that we do interact in a professional way, but it's also nice to feel that there's a developing friendship there. So do take advantage of opportunities. Don't be shy about reaching out. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much of more time. Thank you so much to our panel of speakers, and Eleanor, I didn't know I was going to sign that. Thank you. Please do go grab some tea and biscuits.
Oh, yes, because of the senior.
So things like when you prepare your home or when you do nervous or right, can't do things. Oh, it's not you don't want to me. It's just like someone. And I think a lot of you know, what ring book that is the cat's company thing. But it's